Galactic leaders were shocked. The human called them out on their attack. The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber hummed with tension as representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections. The air recyclers worked overtime, mixing atmospheric requirements for beings who breathed everything from methane to pure oxygen. At the center of it all stood a single human male, barely 5 feet 10 inches tall, wearing nothing more than a simple blue uniform with Earth's insignia. Commander Marcus Chen had been expecting this summons for weeks. Ever since the incident at Kepler 442b, the entire galaxy had been buzzing with outrage. 3 major species, the reptilian Vorthak Empire, the insectoid Zephyrian Collective, and the energy-based Luminar Federation, had filed formal complaints against humanity. They demanded immediate sanctions, territorial restrictions, and what essentially amounted to humanity's exile from civilized space. The Vorthak representative, a massive creature with scales that shifted from deep purple to angry red, slammed a clawed appendage against his speaking platform. "The humans have violated every principle of galactic law," his translator device announced in perfect galactic standard. "They interfered in a lawful military operation, destroyed billions of credits worth of equipment, and worst of all, they made us look like fools in front of the entire sector." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegate, a mantis-like being whose compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like tiny rainbows, clicked her mandibles in what Marcus recognized as their species' version of applause. "The human vessel appeared from nowhere," she chittered. "Our sensors, among the most advanced in known space, detected nothing until they were already within our formation. How is this possible? What dark technology do they possess?" The Luminar representative didn't speak. Their kind communicated through controlled electromagnetic pulses. But the translation matrix conveyed their message clearly. Humanity represents an unknown variable in galactic stability. Their actions suggest capabilities that exceed their apparent technological level. This is disturbing. Marcus stood quietly through the accusations, his hands clasped behind his back. He had been trained for diplomatic situations, but nothing in his career had prepared him for being the sole human representative facing down nearly 50 angry alien species. Earth was still too new to the galactic community to have earned a permanent seat on the council. They were here only because the accusations were so serious that galactic law required the accused party to respond. High Counselor Zerath, an ancient being whose species had been extinct for millennia but lived on as pure consciousness in crystalline matrices, called for order. "Commander Chen of Earth," the voice echoed from speakers throughout the chamber, "you stand accused of unprovoked aggression against a lawful joint military exercise. The charges include destruction of property, interference in sovereign military operations, and reckless endangerment of galactic peace. How do you answer?" Marcus stepped forward to the speaking circle, a raised platform that projected his voice throughout the massive chamber. He looked around slowly, meeting the gazes of creatures that ranged from barely humanoid to utterly alien. Some had faces he could read, others were completely incomprehensible. But they all shared one thing in common. They expected him to grovel, to apologize, to beg for mercy. "High Counselor," Marcus began, his voice steady and clear, "I reject every single charge brought against humanity and my crew." The chamber erupted. Delegates leaped to their feet, tentacles waved in agitation, energy beings flared brighter, and the translator systems struggled to keep up with the sudden cacophony of outraged voices. Some species made sounds that couldn't be translated at all, pure emotion in audio form. "Silence!" High Counselor Zerath's voice boomed, and the chamber's acoustic dampeners activated, muting all other sounds. "The human will explain his rejection of these charges." Marcus waited for the last echo to die away before speaking again. With respect to this council and the member species, the charges are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what actually happened at Kepler 442b. But before I address the specific incident, I need to address the larger issue here. He paused, letting his words sink in. You call it a lawful joint military exercise. I call it what it actually was: target practice on a defenseless civilian population. The Vorthak representative reared up, his massive bulk making the platform creak. The Kepler 442b settlement was an illegal colony. They had no right to be there. According to whose law? Marcus shot back. The settlement was established by the Terralian Exodus fleet after their homeworld was destroyed in a solar flare. They were refugees looking for any habitable planet where they could rebuild their civilization. They found an uninhabited world, performed all the required scans to ensure no sentient life existed there, and began the slow process of creating a new home. The planet was within the disputed neutral zone. The Zephyrian delegate clicked rapidly. No settlement was permitted without approval from all three bordering powers. Marcus pulled out a data pad and held it up. I've reviewed the Galactic Settlement Accords, all 47 amendments, and the special provisions for refugee populations. According to Section 12, subsection C, any refugee population may establish temporary settlements on uninhabited worlds within neutral space, provided they submit formal requests for permanent status within 1 galactic standard year. The Terralians filed their paperwork 8 months ago. It's been sitting in the Galactic Immigration Bureau ever since. An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Several delegates began consulting their own data systems, while others sent rapid communications to their respective governments. Marcus continued. So when your 3 fleets arrived at Kepler 442b, you weren't responding to an illegal settlement. You were conducting what you called a training exercise against a legitimate refugee colony of 40,000 civilians, men, women, and children who had already lost everything once and were trying to rebuild their lives. The Luminar representative pulsed with agitated energy patterns. The settlement's legal status is irrelevant. Our forces were conducting a simulation exercise in that system. The refugees should have evacuated when ordered. Evacuated to where? Marcus's voice rose slightly. These people spent their life savings on basic terraforming equipment. They used the last of their resources to plant crops that won't be ready for harvest for another 6 months. You gave them 12 hours to evacuate an entire colony. Where exactly were 40,000 people supposed to go with 12 hours' notice and no transportation? The chamber was growing uncomfortable. Marcus could see it in the body language of the delegates who had expressive faces, and in the electromagnetic signatures of the energy-based beings. They hadn't expected this level of detailed knowledge from humanity. Furthermore, Marcus continued, let's examine what you call a training exercise. Your combined fleets numbered over 300 ships, heavy cruisers, assault frigates, and at least a dozen planet-killer-class dreadnoughts. The exercise scenario, according to the military broadcasts my ship intercepted, was urban pacification of a rebellious colony. The simulated enemy was described as terrorist civilians using makeshift weapons and guerrilla tactics. He looked directly at the Vorthak representative. General Krax, isn't it interesting how closely the exercise parameters match the actual Terralian settlement, down to the estimated population, the layout of their agricultural zones, and even the defensive capabilities they might have if they tried to resist? General Krax's scales shifted to a deep, angry crimson. You dare question military intelligence? The exercise parameters were randomly generated. Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a particularly pleasant expression. Random? Your tactical computer selected a scenario that perfectly matched a real refugee settlement in the exact same system where you were conducting the exercise? What are the mathematical odds of that, General? 1 trillion to 1? 1 quintillion to 1? The Zephyrian delegate's mandibles clicked nervously. Even if the exercise parameters were unfortunate, our forces never opened fire. No actual harm was done. No harm? Marcus's voice dropped to a deadly quiet that somehow carried throughout the entire chamber. I was there. I saw what your exercise looked like from the ground. 300 warships in attack formation, weapons powered and locked onto civilian targets. Children running through the streets screaming, parents holding their families close, certain they were about to die, just like they did when their sun exploded. He stepped closer to the speaking circle's edge. And you know what the really sick part was? Your ships weren't just running targeting solutions on the colony buildings. They were running detailed scans of the population centers, cataloging defensive positions, mapping escape routes. All the data you would need if you ever decided the Terralians had outlived their usefulness. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed muted. So, when my ship, the UES Defiance, dropped out of hyperspace and found 300 alien warships terrorizing 40,000 refugees, do you know what I did? I followed standard human protocols for first contact in a crisis situation. Marcus activated a holographic display from his datapad. The three-dimensional image showed the Kepler 442b system with hundreds of red dots surrounding a small blue-green world. I broadcast on all frequencies, identifying my ship and requesting an explanation. When no one responded to my hails, I moved closer to assess the situation. That's when your ships detected me and immediately assumed hostile intent. The hologram shifted, showing a single green dot, Marcus's ship, approaching the massive fleet formation. The first weapon lock came from a Vorthak heavy cruiser, followed immediately by targeting systems from 12 other ships. When I maintained course toward the planet to investigate the civilian situation, your entire fleet rotated to bring weapons to bear on my ship. General Crack stood up, his massive form towering over his platform. Your ship appeared without warning in the middle of a military exercise. Of course we targeted you. Standard protocol demands. Standard protocol, Marcus interrupted. According to the Galactic Rules of Engagement, Section 4, requires you to issue a warning before targeting an unidentified vessel. You opened fire with targeting lasers and missile locks before my communications officer even finished broadcasting our identification codes. The hologram shifted again, showing the timeline of events in precise detail. But here's the really interesting part. The moment your ships targeted me, every single Terralian in that colony stopped running. They all looked up at the sky, and do you know what they did? They started cheering. Marcus let that sink in for a moment. 40,000 people who had been terrified for their lives suddenly started celebrating because they saw one small ship face down your entire fleet, and they knew, somehow they knew, that help had arrived. The Luminar representative pulsed with what the translators interpreted as confusion. How could they know this? Your species is unknown to them. Marcus's smile was grim but proud. Because humans don't abandon innocent people to bullies. Ever, no matter the odds. The silence in the Galactic Council chamber stretched like a taut cable ready to snap. Marcus Chen stood in the speaking circle, watching the faces and forms of 47 different species as they processed his words. Some delegates were frantically consulting data terminals, others were engaged in urgent sub-vocal communications with their home governments, and a few simply stared at him with what he hoped was newfound respect rather than mounting hostility. High Counselor Zerath's crystalline form pulsed with a slow, thoughtful rhythm. Commander Chen, your account differs significantly from the official reports submitted by the 3 military forces involved. They describe your ship as launching an unprovoked attack that disabled multiple vessels and caused significant casualties. Marcus nodded slowly. High Counselor, I expected they would frame it that way. That's why I brought this. He activated another holographic projection, much larger and more detailed than the previous one. The three-dimensional display showed the Kepler 442b system in perfect detail, complete with ship positions, energy readings, and comm traffic. But this wasn't a simple tactical display. It was a complete recording of the entire incident. This is the full sensor log from the UES Defiance, covering the 18 hours we spent in the Kepler 442b system. Everything you're about to see is unedited, unfiltered, and verified by our ship's AI with quantum lock timestamps. I invite any member of this council to examine the data with their own experts. General Crax's scales shifted to an ominous dark red. You recorded a classified military operation without permission. That alone is a violation of what law, exactly? Marcus interrupted. The UES Defiance was in neutral space, responding to what appeared to be a threat to civilian refugees. We had every right to defend ourselves and document the encounter. The holographic display began to move, showing the approach of Marcus's ship toward the massive fleet formation surrounding the planet. The Defiance was tiny compared to the alien warships, a sleek frigate barely 300 meters long, facing down vessels that measured in kilometers. Watch carefully, Marcus said. Time index 142207. This is when we first attempted to make contact. The hologram displayed the communication attempts, showing Marcus's ship broadcasting identification and peaceful intentions on all standard frequencies. The response from the alien fleet was immediate and hostile, dozens of targeting beams locked onto the human vessel. Time index 142231, Marcus continued. 24 seconds after our first communication attempt, your ships had already achieved target lock. No warnings issued, no request for identification, no attempt at communication whatsoever. The Zephyrian delegate's compound eyes reflected the holographic light in rapid, agitated patterns. Your ship was approaching at combat speed. We had to assume hostile intent. Marcus paused the display. Combat speed? We were moving at 0.3 C, standard approach velocity for non-combat situations. Our weapons were powered down, our shields were in passive mode, and we were broadcasting our peaceful intentions every 15 seconds. He resumed the playback. Time index 142512. This is when things got interesting. The display showed the human ship suddenly accelerating, not toward the fleet, but in a complex, evasive pattern that took it around the formation's flank. What happened next caused several delegates to gasp or make their species equivalent of surprise sounds. Your ships opened fire, Marcus said simply. Not warning shots. Full military-grade weapons designed to destroy my ship and kill my crew. The hologram showed brilliant lances of energy and streams of projectiles converging on the space where the Defiance had been moments before. The human ship twisted and danced through the barrage with an almost impossible grace, its movements too fluid and precise for any computer to calculate. How? The word came from the Etherian delegate, a being of pure thought that rarely spoke in council sessions. How did your ship evade our targeting systems? The mathematical probability of avoiding that volume of fire is essentially 0. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Have you ever watched humans play sports, Ambassador? We have these games where individuals or small teams face overwhelming odds, where split-second decisions and perfect timing mean the difference between victory and failure. We call it being in the zone, a state where human reflexes and intuition transcend normal limitations. He gestured to the hologram. Lieutenant Sarah Torres was our pilot that day, former champion of the Terran Fighter Racing League, where pilots navigate courses at 90% of light speed while avoiding obstacles that appear with millisecond warning times. When your ships opened fire, she didn't rely on computers or predictive algorithms. She felt the rhythm of your weapons, anticipated your targeting patterns, and flew by pure human instinct. The display continued, showing the impossible dance of the human ship through the deadly light show. But Marcus wasn't finished with his revelations. Time index 142645. This is when we returned fire. The delegates leaned forward, expecting to see the human ship unleashing devastating weapons. Instead, they watched as precise, almost surgical strikes disabled specific systems on the attacking vessels. Not one ship was destroyed, not one crew member was killed, but in the span of 3 minutes, the effectiveness of the entire fleet was reduced by 70%. Impossible, General Krax rumbled. Our ship's defensive systems are the finest in the galaxy. Your weapons should have been absorbed or deflected. Marcus nodded. Your defensive systems are indeed impressive, General. They're designed to stop every known type of energy weapon, kinetic projectile, and exotic matter beam in the galactic database. Unfortunately for you, human weapons aren't in that database. He highlighted several of the successful strikes on the hologram. We don't use plasma cannons or particle beams or molecular disruptors. We use something much simpler and apparently much more effective against over-engineered alien defenses. The Luminar representative pulsed with rapid, agitated energy patterns. What type of primitive weapons could possibly penetrate our shields? Kinetic projectiles, Marcus said simply. We fire chunks of metal really fast. The silence that followed was profound. Several delegates began rapid calculations on their personal computers, while others sent urgent messages to their military advisors. You see, Marcus continued, when humanity first developed space weapons, we took a different approach than most species. Instead of trying to create exotic energy fields or manipulate subatomic particles, we focused on fundamental physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. If you make something heavy enough and throw it fast enough, it will punch through anything. The hologram zoomed in on one of the disabled Vorthak ships, showing the precise hole punched through its shield generators. Our railguns accelerate tungsten penetrators to 97% of light speed. The projectiles are so small and fast that most sensors can't track them, and they hit with enough kinetic energy to crack a moon. But we can tune the mass and velocity to deliver exactly the amount of force needed for any situation. Barbaric, the Zephyrian delegate clicked. Crude projectile weapons against sophisticated energy shields. Marcus shrugged. Sometimes the old ways work best. But here's the really important part. Watch what happened after we disabled your weapons. The holographic display showed the aftermath of the brief combat. The human ship had positioned itself between the alien fleet and the planet, but instead of pressing the attack, it simply stopped. Time index 142933. We achieved tactical superiority over your combined fleet in under 3 minutes. We could have destroyed every ship present. Instead, we transmitted this message on all frequencies. Marcus activated an audio recording. His own voice, steady and calm, filled the council chamber. This is Commander Marcus Chen of the United Earth Ship Defiance. We have disabled the weapon systems of all vessels that fired upon us. We have no desire for further conflict. We request immediate communication with fleet commanders to discuss the safety of the civilian population on Kepler 442b. The recording continued. Our ship's medical bay is available for any injured personnel. Our engineers can assist with emergency repairs to critical life support systems. We wish to resolve this situation peacefully and ensure the safety of all involved parties. Marcus looked around the chamber. Does that sound like the behavior of an aggressive, militaristic species bent on conquest? General Krax's scales had shifted to a deep purple that Marcus's briefing materials indicated was the Vorthak equivalent of shame. You offered to help our wounded, even after we attacked you? Of course we did, Marcus replied. That's what humans do. We don't hold grudges against soldiers who were following orders, especially when no one was actually hurt. Your crews were doing their duty as they understood it. The problem wasn't with your soldiers, General. The problem was with your orders. The Zephyrian delegate's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Marcus recognized as distress. But our report said you destroyed 3 ships and caused hundreds of casualties. Marcus sighed. Your reports were lies. Watch the complete sensor log. Count the casualties. We went out of our way to avoid killing anyone, even when they were actively trying to kill us. He advanced the hologram to show detailed damage assessments. The Vorthak heavy cruiser Deathbringer. Shield generators disabled, weapons offline, but life support and propulsion intact. The Zephyrian assault carrier Swarm Queen. Fighter bays sealed shut, command systems disrupted, but crew quarters undamaged. The Luminar Dreadnought Radiant Fury. Energy collection matrices overloaded, but core consciousness banks fully protected. Marcus paused and looked directly at the 3 accusers. 0 fatalities. 47 minor injuries, mostly from crew members being thrown around when their ships lost artificial gravity for a few minutes. Total repair costs, approximately 50 million galactic credits. Compare that to the 800 billion credits your fleet spent getting to Kepler 442b for your training exercise. The mathematical reality was sinking in among the delegates. A single human ship had defeated a combined fleet of 3 major powers, caused minimal damage, and offered humanitarian aid to their former attackers. It was unprecedented in galactic history. But Marcus wasn't finished. However, there's something even more important than the tactical details of our encounter, something that goes to the heart of why humanity deserves a place in the galactic community. He gestured toward the hologram, which now showed the planet below. While we were disabling your weapons, do you know what was happening on the surface? The display zoomed in to show the Terralian colony. Instead of chaos and panic, there was organized activity. People were working together, helping each other, preparing for whatever might come next. The Terralians didn't run and hide when they saw your fleets. They didn't despair or give up hope. They organized themselves into emergency response teams, set up medical stations for potential casualties, and prepared to defend their new home with farming tools and construction equipment if necessary. Marcus's voice grew stronger. But when they saw one human ship stand up to your entire armada, they knew they weren't alone anymore. They knew that somewhere in the galaxy, there was at least one species that believed innocent people shouldn't be terrorized by military bullies. The chamber was completely still. Even the background sounds of life support seemed muted. That's what humanity brings to the galactic community, Marcus continued. Not advanced weapons or exotic technology, not vast fleets or economic power. We bring the simple idea that might doesn't make right, that bullies should be confronted regardless of the odds, that refugees and civilians deserve protection even if they can't pay for it. He looked around the chamber, meeting the gazes of as many delegates as he could. Every species in this chamber became spacefaring through intelligence, determination, and technological advancement. But how many of you remember what it was like to be weak, to be outnumbered, to face impossible odds with nothing but courage and the belief that you were fighting for something bigger than yourselves? Marcus paused, letting his words sink in. Humanity remembers. We've been the underdogs in every conflict we've ever faced. We've learned to win through ingenuity, determination, and an absolute refusal to abandon our principles, no matter what the cost. The holographic display shifted one final time, showing the aftermath of the incident. The 3 fleets withdrawing from the system, the Terralian colony continuing their work of building a new civilization, and the human ship maintaining a protective orbit until the situation was fully resolved. So yes, Marcus said, his voice rising to fill the great chamber, I reject every charge brought against humanity. We didn't commit unprovoked aggression, we stopped it. We didn't interfere with a lawful military operation, we exposed an illegal intimidation campaign against refugee civilians. We didn't threaten galactic peace, we preserved it. His words echoed in the sudden silence, carrying the weight of absolute conviction. The question this council needs to answer isn't whether humanity should be punished for our actions at Kepler 442b. The question is whether the galactic community has room for a species that puts principles before politics, justice before power, and protecting the innocent before protecting the status quo. Marcus stepped back from the speaking circle's edge and waited for their answer. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. In its 1,000-year history, through debates over territorial disputes, trade wars, and even the occasional genocide, there had always been some level of background noise, the hum of translator matrices, the whisper of atmospheric processors, the soft sounds of beings existing in their preferred environments. Now even those had fallen silent. Commander Marcus Chen stood in the speaking circle, his hands still clasped behind his back, waiting for the storm he knew was coming. He had just systematically dismantled the accusations of 3 major galactic powers, revealed their military exercise as what it really was, and challenged the fundamental assumptions that governed interspecies relations. In human terms, he had just thrown down the gauntlet in front of the most powerful entities in known space. The first reaction came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Theln of the Rigelian Trade Confederation, a species known more for their commercial acumen than military prowess, activated his speaking platform with a series of musical tones. "Commander Chen," Ambassador Thelon's voice carried a harmonic quality that made even the translators sound melodic. "Your presentation raises disturbing questions about the true nature of what occurred at Kepler 442b. However, it also raises equally disturbing questions about humanity itself." Marcus nodded respectfully. "I'm prepared to address any concerns the Council may have about my species, Ambassador." Thelon's crystalline features shifted in what Marcus had learned was their equivalent of a frown. "Your ship's capabilities appear to exceed anything in our current understanding of military technology. The tactical recordings show maneuvers that violate several fundamental principles of physics as we understand them. How do we know that humanity isn't the real threat here?" Before Marcus could respond, another delegate activated their platform. This was Counselor Vex of the Hegemony, a machine intelligence that represented dozens of cybernetic species. Query: Human vessel demonstrated combat effectiveness ratio of 300 to 1 against combined forces of 3 major powers. Probability calculation suggests either A. Human technology far exceeds galactic norms. B. Military capabilities of established powers have been grossly overestimated. Or C. Human combat doctrine represents paradigm shift requiring complete reevaluation of strategic planning. The synthetic being's optical sensors focused on Marcus with mechanical precision. Additional query: what prevents humanity from using these capabilities for conquest rather than protection? Marcus had expected this line of questioning. Counselor Vex, Ambassador Thelon, your concerns are completely understandable. If I were in your position, I would be asking the same questions. He activated his holographic display again, but this time it showed not the battle at Kepler 442b, but a series of star charts centered on Earth's solar system. Let me address your concerns with facts. Humanity has been spacefaring for approximately 200 standard years. In that time, we have established colonies on 47 worlds, all of them previously uninhabited. We have encountered 17 different species, including yours. Our response in every single case has followed the same pattern. The star chart highlighted each first contact situation. When we met the Altarian Mining Consortium, they were being attacked by pirates. We drove off the pirates and helped establish security protocols for their mining operations. When we encountered the Procyon research expedition, they were stranded on a failed colony world. We provided emergency supplies and transportation back to their home system. Marcus continued through each example, showing a consistent pattern of humans helping other species without asking for anything in return. "The pattern is clear," he said. "Humanity doesn't conquer. We don't demand tribute or territory or submission. We help when we can, trade when it's mutually beneficial, and defend ourselves when attacked. That's it." General Krax rose from his platform, his massive bulk making the floor vibrate. Pretty words, human, but you still haven't explained how one small ship defeated our entire fleet. What weapons do you possess that we don't know about? Marcus smiled grimly. General, I already told you. We use kinetic projectiles, chunks of metal accelerated to near-light speed. The technology is straightforward enough that any species could build similar weapons. He paused, studying the reptilian general's expression. But that's not really what you're asking, is it? You want to know how we could be so much more effective than you expected. The answer isn't in our weapons, General. It's in how we use them. The hologram shifted to show tactical analyses of various galactic military engagements over the past century. I've studied your combat doctrines, all of you. Every major power relies on the same basic principles: overwhelming firepower, superior numbers, technological advantages. You fight wars by bringing more ships, bigger guns, stronger shields. Marcus highlighted specific patterns in the data. But there's a problem with that approach. When everyone uses the same tactics, when everyone builds the same types of ships and weapons, warfare becomes predictable. You're all fighting the last war over and over again. The Zephyrian delegate's compound eyes reflected rapid patterns of light. And humans fight differently. Humans fight to win, Marcus said simply. We don't care if our tactics are conventional or if our weapons are the most advanced. We care about achieving our objectives with minimal casualties on all sides. He gestured to the tactical display. Take the engagement at Kepler 442b. Your fleets were positioned for a classic demonstration of force, arranged in parade formation to look impressive and intimidating. Perfect for scaring civilians, terrible for actual combat. Marcus highlighted the positioning of the alien ships. Your formation had no overlapping fields of fire, no mutual support capabilities, and no provisions for coordinated maneuvers. You were set up to look threatening, not to fight effectively. General Krax's scales shifted to an uncomfortable yellow-green. Our formation was standard for non-combat operations. Exactly, Marcus interrupted. You weren't prepared for a real fight because you never expected anyone to actually challenge you. That's not tactics, General. That's bullying. The chamber erupted again as delegates from multiple species began arguing among themselves. Some were defending their military doctrines, others were demanding more information about human capabilities, and a few were making what sounded like threats. High Counselor Zerath called for order, the ancient consciousness pulsing with authority. Commander Chen, your analysis of our military capabilities is illuminating. However, it does not address the fundamental concern raised by several council members. How do we know that humanity's intentions will remain benevolent? Marcus had been waiting for this question. It was the heart of the matter. The real reason he was standing here facing down the most powerful beings in the galaxy. High Counselor, that's the wrong question, he said quietly. The question isn't whether humanity's intentions will remain benevolent. The question is whether the galactic community has the courage to embrace what humanity represents. He deactivated the holographic display and stepped to the center of the speaking circle. Every species in this chamber achieved spaceflight through intelligence, determination, and cooperation within their own kind. But what happened after you reached the stars? How did you handle first contact with other intelligent species? Marcus looked around the chamber, meeting as many gazes as he could. I've read the historical records. The Vorthak expansion wars where your people conquered 37 systems in 2 decades. The Zephyrian swarm campaigns where you absorbed entire civilizations into your collective. The Luminar Enlightenment where you elevated primitive species by forcibly converting them to energy beings. The silence was deafening. The pattern is always the same, Marcus continued. First contact, followed by conquest, absorption, or subjugation. Every major power in this chamber built their empire by taking what they wanted from weaker species. He paused, letting the weight of history settle over the assembly. Humanity is different. Not because we're more advanced, or more powerful, or more intelligent. We're different because we remember what it was like to be the underdog. We remember what it's like to face extinction and keep fighting anyway. Marcus activated one final holographic display, this one showing Earth's history. Images of wars, disasters, struggles against impossible odds, and people standing up for principles even when it meant certain death. This is why you can trust humanity's intentions, he said, because we know what it's like to suffer. We know what it's like to be afraid, to be outnumbered, to face enemies who seem unbeatable, and we know that the only thing that matters in those moments is whether someone, somewhere, is willing to stand up and say, "This is wrong." The images continued to flow. Humans helping other humans, sacrificing for strangers, choosing principles over survival. You want to know what prevents humanity from becoming conquerors? It's simple. We've been conquered. We've been oppressed, enslaved, dominated by tyrants throughout our history. And we learned that power without justice is just another form of evil. Marcus looked directly at General Krax. General, your species became spacefaring 8,000 years ago. When was the last time the Vorthak Empire faced a real threat to its existence? The massive reptilian's scales shifted through several color changes before settling on a muted gray. Our military superiority has been unquestioned for millennia. Exactly, Marcus said. You've been so powerful for so long that you've forgotten what it's like to be vulnerable. That's why you could design a training exercise that terrorized 40,000 refugees. You literally couldn't understand their perspective. He turned to the Zephyrian delegate. Counselor Zix, when did your collective last face the possibility of extinction? The mantis-like being's mandibles clicked nervously. The Zephyrian collective has not faced existential threat since our expansion beyond our home system 3,000 years ago. And the Luminar Federation? Marcus asked the energy being. We transcended physical vulnerability when we abandoned biological form 2 millennia ago, came the translated response. Marcus nodded. There's the real difference between humanity and the established powers. You've all forgotten what it's like to be mortal, to be afraid, to need help from others. We remember, and that memory is what makes us trustworthy. He stepped back to address the entire council. You ask what prevents humanity from becoming conquerors? The answer is that conquest requires forgetting the suffering of others. It requires believing that your desires matter more than their lives. Humanity can't do that because we've been on the receiving end too many times. The chamber was silent again, but this time it felt different. The tension was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Contemplation, perhaps even understanding. Ambassador Thelen spoke first, his musical voice carrying a note of wonder. You're saying that humanity's greatest strength is that you remember weakness? Not just weakness, Marcus corrected. We remember what it's like to need help and not receive it. We remember what it's like to face impossible odds alone, and we've decided that no one else should have to experience that if we can prevent it. High Counselor Zerath's crystalline form pulsed slowly, thoughtfully. Commander Chen, humanity's application for associate membership in the Galactic Council was submitted 6 months ago. Your performance here today suggests that perhaps we should reconsider the timeline for full membership. Marcus felt a surge of hope, but he kept his expression neutral. High Counselor, humanity doesn't seek membership for the prestige or the power. We seek it because we believe the galaxy needs voices that remember what it's like to be small, afraid, and alone. And what would humanity do with a seat on this council? General Krax asked, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than hostility. Marcus smiled. The same thing we did at Kepler 442b, General. Stand between the strong and the weak, protect those who can't protect themselves, and remind the powerful that their strength carries the responsibility to be just. The vote, when it came 3 hours later, was closer than Marcus had hoped, but decisive nonetheless. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council by a margin of 31 to 16, with the 3 accusers abstaining. But more importantly, the Terralian refugees were granted permanent settlement rights on Kepler 442b. The training exercises targeting civilian populations were banned by universal accord. And for the first time in galactic history, a mandatory protocol was established requiring military forces to provide humanitarian aid to any civilians affected by their operations. As Marcus prepared to leave the council chamber, General Krax approached him. The massive Vorthax scales had shifted to a deep blue that Marcus's briefing materials indicated was their color of respect. "Human," the general rumbled. "You have taught us something today. Perhaps it is time the Vorthak Empire remembered what we fought for, rather than simply what we fought against." Marcus extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. After a moment's hesitation, General Krax reached out with one massive claw and gently grasped the human's hand. "General," Marcus said with a smile, "I think that might be the beginning of a beautiful friendship." As he walked out of the chamber, Marcus couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy had room for one more species that remembered what it was like to be human.